Welcome into the Starting Five podcast, brought to you by Big Time Hoops Maine and presented by Town & Country Federal Credit Union. When it comes to finances, members of Town & Country Federal Credit Union enjoy nothing but net. Become a member and start scoring benefits, including a no-fee, no minimum balance rewards checking account that pays you. Plus, get up to $25 a month in ATM fees and more. Free, no-fee debit cards are offered to anyone 14 and older, and Town & Country has one of the highest-rated mobile apps in the country, so you can do you and your banking anytime from anywhere. Local service, local decisions, and awesome rates on loans too. Open an account in 5 minutes at tcfcu.com. Federally insured by NCUA. Membership eligibility required. Equal opportunity lender. Visit tcfcu.com to find out more. The Starting Five podcast is also brought to you by Next Gen Fitness. Are you an athlete looking to enhance your performance on the field, court, or ice? Do you want tried and true workouts to get you stronger, faster, and explosive? Next Gen Sports Performance is programmed to develop the superior athlete and increase athletic performance. The program targets the athlete's foundation to success, strength, speed, power, conditioning, and agility. Located at Next Gen Fitness in Scarborough, a state-of-the-art, clean, modern facility with all the equipment, trainers, and coaches ready to help you meet all your athletic and fitness goals. Visit nextgenfitness.com for more info. That's NXGEN fitness.com. And now, here's Taylor Mannix and Greg Levinsky with your Starting Five podcast. Welcome into the Starting Five podcast, brought to you by Big Time Hoops Maine and presented by Town & Country Federal Credit Union. Greg, what's up, my man? How are we doing today? Taylor Mannix here, Greg Levinsky here. We got episode 8. What's going on?
Oh, man. High school basketball. You know, it's been a time. Crazy night last night. Looking forward to getting into it. It's crazy. We're really now over halfway, almost through the regular season. Tournament almost around the corner. In about a month, we'll have prelim games. So, man, it's flying by.
It's flying right by you, right about that. And then, you know, quite the weekend. I know that for us, too, last week we got to a couple games. And, then, of course, last night's games we'll be able to touch on. But We'll go through what we'll be talking about in the 5 topics today. The first topic is going to be the Thornton Academy Portland High School boys game from last night and touch on a little bit of our favorites in AA after this game and, of course, the results over the last week. The GNG, Grey New Gloucester girls and boys programs will also touch on Class A and the landscape there. That'll be our second topic after the Portland and Thornton game, but GNG got a lot of special things going on there. It'll be fun to touch on that, and of course, the Class A landscape. The third topic, Greg did an incredible cover story. You can check it out over on Big Time Hoops website on the OOB girls and boys team. Landon Johnson, Elise McNair. We'll talk a lot about them as well, and discuss Class C South, which, thanks to all the coaches who reached out to us, we got a ton of stuff for you on Class C South at the girls and boys side. Seems pretty competitive this year. Number 4, our Class B contenders. We kind of talked a lot about Oceanside, but there's so many more other teams involved on the girls South, the boys South, the girls North, the boys North. We'll touch on all of those on the 4th topic, get some quick hits on the Class B contenders. And finally, the 5th topic, best duos in the state. We got to give best duos in the state. Shout out to our the kid on Instagram, Braden Rio, for the suggestion. I mean, we couldn't deny him. We couldn't deny him. So we're gonna give you all that. And
Braden, make sure you get us yours as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure Tom will have some cool graphics for it. So we'll get some sweet graphics up, and we'll have some fun with it. So the best duos in the state, and we encourage everyone who's listening to this too after we put out ours.
Answer the question for sure.
Answer the question. We would love to hear yours after we get ours. So, we'll get to those 5 things shortly. But let's first discuss some things that, we won't maybe caught our eye, worth our attention like we always do. And first, the power rankings. We'll start with you, Greg, in the South for the girls and who you had for the power rankings this week.
Updated power rankings. Because of last night's upsets and changes, there was definitely some shifting around. Girls South, top 2 remain the same, Oceanside and Thornton Academy, but NYA girls up to number 3, the Halldale girls up to number 4, and congratulations to the Grey New Gloucester Patriots. Your girls team is number 5 now in in Girls South after a huge Class A win against Brunswick last night.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's awesome to see again. Halldale and some new faces there. We mentioned Halldale. They were averaging 73.4 points per game, only allowing 29.
Yeah, 44 points per game difference.
Really talented team there.
They've won like 30-something in a row. Yeah, I mean,
unreal.
I'm sure, we'll get to them when we talk to C, but Halldale is for real, and so is NYA. We have 2 C teams in the top 4.
Really, really good programs down there. For my North girls, the Bangor Rams holding it down at the number 1 spot. The Oxford Hills Vikings at number 2. The Cheverus Stags at 3. Gardner Tigers at 4. And Old Town at 5. No real changes there. All teams, I think, performing. And, of course, Greg, to me, the power on the girls' side, especially in the North, lies in AA.
100%.
I just think Bangor, Oxford Hills, Cheverus, once we start seeing those rematches, maybe there'll be some shuffling, but until we see some losses there, Gardner Old Town holding it down there. There are a few other programs that in my head I felt like I probably could have given some honorable mention to, but didn't want to really jip Old Town out of it, because I think Old Town, again, the first team in Class B to 10 wins. It's tough to punish them for being that good, so not many changes for my girls. What about your South boys?
Yeah, so again, it was a little bit of a messy situation last night with some upsets, and so Thornton Academy stays at 1 for people that are going to be like, oh, wow, they lost last night. Well, I'll tell you what, Thornton Academy's beaten every team they've played within the South region, so that's why they stay at 1. Falmouth boys up to number 2. They've been hot lately. Gorham's back in at number 3 because they beat South Portland, who's number 4, and then Dirigo stays in a Class C team at number 5. So kind of a weird week where, one team beats another team who loses to another team who beats another team, and kind of a little bit unexpected, honestly, in AA South boys. A lot of weird wins and losses this week. I mean, I almost had Bonnie Eagle in there, but then they lost to Sanford. But they also had beaten Gorham 2 games before. Gorham had lost 4 in a row. So super weird in South this week, but it's mostly the same teams, just a little bit reshuffled.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should mention, too, just because I want to shout out the 2 girls' teams that I thought about, Dexter up in the North at 9-0 and C, and Hodgdon at 9-0 and C. I see you up there. I just wanted to make sure they get some love. North boys for me, Brewer remaining at number 1, Brady Saunders and company leading the way there. But this will maybe surprise some people after a big win over Thornton Academy last night. The Portland Bulldogs moved to number 2 for me in the power rankings. I just think after a hard-fought game where I felt they maybe deserved a little bit more against Oxford Hills and a better result. Shout out to Oxford Hills, though, for grinding that win out. That's what championship teams do. But Portland getting that win over TA, Oxford Hills losing to Lewiston. Portland moves up to the 2 spot, and I'll be honest, Greg, we've talked about this a lot off air. I'll say it right on here. Show me a better defense than Portland. I haven't seen one yet. I think Portland plays some of the best defense we've seen in the state.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that as much as it pains me as a Deering alum,
right,
I have that bias still. But Portland is, it's our first topic, so I don't want to do too much on it. But yes.
Unreal team.
Correct.
Oxford Hills at 3, Ellsworth at 4, and welcome back into the top 5, Lewiston. A big win over Oxford Hills. I know Cole Pulkinen was not a part of that win for them. He was out for Oxford Hills, but still being able to get a win for Lewiston right there. Yeah, they're such an up-and-down team, and now it's them and Portland with the same record at the top of AA North.
It's unfair, obviously, and that's a consideration that we make in these rankings if someone was out, but it's unfair to penalize a team that wins. So I agree that
they still had Tegan Pelletier.
Right, and that's why I put Grey New Gloucester in there. I know Brunswick was missing one of their starters on the girls' side, but, the great teams have more than one player, so...
Well, right, exactly. And we saw Oxford Hills in person. Like, Cole Pulkinen is one of the best players on that team. He's a very talented kid, super athletic. We saw him throwing down at the Expo. Yep. But yeah, they have enough there that they should be able to get a win over Lewiston. So I'm with you. That's where that comes from me. Let's look at the big time performers of the week. Greg, I'll let you take over for what you found on the boys' side here. Before we get to
we're gonna date it back a little bit just because we're a little bit off schedule this week because Taylor had a hell of a time in Buffalo.
Yeah, right.
No, but it's all good. So last Monday, a couple of performances. Mason Desjardins, 36 for Forest Hills in a win. Fort Kent's Ethan Daigle, 42 points. Glad to get Fort Kent on the pod. Of course, Tom Bard went there, so I'm sure he's happy to hear that as well. Looking at Tuesday, there was a 38-point, 9-rebound, 9-assist performance from Jameer Rose and that big noble win over Gorham, a 32-point performance from Andrew Poulin. Then on Thursday, a bunch of good performances. I think the best one to me, I'd like to give some acknowledgement to Freeport. Connor Slocum had 25 points, JT Pound had 23, and they beat Lake Region. Lake Region's not bad, so actually a pretty good win for Freeport, honestly. And Charlie Houghton having 33 for Dirigo. We'll talk about them later. Later in the week on Saturday, Mr. Double-Double, Jason Reynolds, 31 and 13. Andrew Poulin had 21 in that game. And then Nathan Hebert, who has been absolutely balling out, had 42 for Grey New Gloucester and a win over Lake Region. So a lot of great games. And then from last night, just a couple to mention on the boys' side. I think that the first one, Andrew Poulin, again, 41 points last night for Winslow. They didn't have Jason Reynolds, didn't need him, killed Belfast by 46. He only played 20 minutes and had 41. John Patnode, shout out to Poland High, 35 points to the Knights for a win over Trape, a 1-point win, so great game there. And then last night as well, I actually saw this one live, Keegan McClure. If the name sounds familiar, Cash McClure's younger brother, had 29 points for Marana Cook in an 87-70 win over Old Orchard Beach. And honestly, I know Marana Cook's B, Old Orchard C, but that was a really big win for a pretty 500 kind of unsure of their identity Marana Cook team.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it definitely kind of showed you a little bit about what they're made of. And, of course, Coach Magnuson is a great coach there, and they know what they're doing at that school. A lot of history there at Marana Cook on the basketball court. On the girls' side, I go to Monday. Lizzy Gruber, 23 points to lead Gardner past Erskine. Last Tuesday, also Molly Hay, who led the Carabec Cobras to their first win of the season with 21 points and a win against the Buckfield Bucks back on Monday. Going to Tuesday of last week, Elise McNair getting her 1,000th point. We'll definitely talk a little bit about that as we get more into our topics. She obviously needed 27 points to do that. She got 28 in the first half alone. She finished with 32 as she continues her dominance against Class C. Georgiana Curtis, they're from Presque Isle last Tuesday with a buzzer-beating shot to beat Caribou. 46-45. Wanted to mention that. Shout out Presque Isle. They've had quite the couple weeks here. Anna Turgeon, who we'll talk a little bit about from last night. She had 26 and a win over Falmouth as well. And Ava Smith, 32 points, 11 rebounds for Lake Region. Tough not to mention as well from last Tuesday, Bailey Breen's career best, 32 points, added 11 rebounds, and a 70-27 win over Camden Hills. Looking to Thursday because not too much happening on that Wednesday. Elise McNair again scoring 26 points. She also hit Old Orchard Beach hit 16 three-pointers in that win as well. She kind of helped lead the way for that one. Maddie Fitz on Thursday, 12 points, 15 assists, 11 rebounds as Cheverus won at 0-7 Deering at the time.
That doesn't even seem like a possible stat
line. Unbelievable stat line for Maddie Fitz. Emma Lizotte scored 8 of her 22 points in the first quarter as they again helped beat Deering 57-35 on Thursday. Ella Pelletier on Thursday helped pace the Vikings to a 68-35 win with 22 points. Sierra Carson right behind her, 21, one of the better combos in the state there. Friday, Anna Oliver, 14 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 steals as Hodgdon went on to beat Southern Aroostook in what was a big matchup up there. They won 48-47, so shout out to Anna Oliver getting it done for Hodgdon over them. On Saturday, Addison Solikowski had 22 points and 13 rebounds to help Thornton Academy remain unbeaten. They are still unbeaten heading into this week as well with 44-47 win over Sanford. Should mention as well, Hunter Hartsgrove collected 30 points and 15 steals in Katahdin's 60-32 win over Van Buren.
I saw that posted on the Big Time Instagram story. I was like, what?
Unreal. And then we'll look at last night. Logan McDonald scored 27 to help Kents Hill over Deergo. The Kents Hill is undefeated. The Huskies are 6-0 right now in Class C. Anna Turgeon, I told you you'd hear about her again, 35 points as the Falmouth Navigators got a big win over Greeley last night.
What a huge week for them, too.
Big week for Falmouth.
Now Ararat was unbeaten. They knocked them off. They knock off rival Greeley, who I don't think they'd beaten in 10 years or something.
Been a long time. And then, of course, Jaden Pingree paced the Spruce Mountain Phoenix to a 9-0 start after last night's game. Key road win over the 5-3 now Madison Bulldogs. Pingree poured in a game-high 24 points as Spruce Mountain remains unbeaten. So pretty fun one there, and of course we'll get into all the other fun topics there. And Greg, you have anything here for games to watch the rest of this week that we need to keep an eye on?
Yeah. So I mean, just quickly from last night, we had circled a few before we recorded. I think the biggest ones, obviously, on the boys' side was that Portland TA win for Portland over TA. On the girls' side, that Brunswick Grey New Gloucester game, which we had picked out before it even happened, and it turned out to be that upset was a big one. Tonight, so we'll have Waynfleet and NYA's going on now. Fort Kent and Hodgdon girls, pretty big game up in the county. Thursday is a little bit lighter. We got Nokomis Brewer boys and Gorham and TA girls, and then Taylor rest of the week. Looks like we got
Friday looks pretty stacked with Dexter at George Stevens on the boys' side, Diergo at Monmouth, Fort Kent at Fort Fairfield, Marshwood at Falmouth, and then, of course, Portland heading up to Oxford Hills on the boys' side. On the girls' side, Cheverus at Hamden on Friday, Skowhegan at Lawrence, and Wyndham at Bangor. A lot of big-time, prime-time matchups. Then Saturday also is nothing to spoil on the girls' side. Some really great matchups. The Halldale girls at Spruce Mountain. That could be a battle of undefeateds this Saturday. And, of course, Mount Ararat at Gardner, another really good matchup. Skank and Machias on the boys' side. We'll see there for Saturday. So a lot to look forward to.
We almost got to head up to Jay.
Yeah, I know, right? A lot to look forward to. And should mention 2 undefeated teams left. No girls and boys programs are undefeated. Brewer, Ellsworth, Diergo, Southern Aroostook on the boys' side. The only undefeated teams remaining on the girls' side. A little bit of a laundry list here, Greg. For the girls, remaining undefeated teams around the state. Gardner, Bangor, Oxford Hills, Thornton Academy, Old Town, Oceanside, Spruce Mountain, Dexter, Hodgdon, NYA, Kents Hill, Halldale, Wisdom, and Deer Isle, Stonington.
What a list.
What a
lot
list.
Of those, some of these, unfortunately for these teams, some of them will have to not be there because they're going to play each other.
Yes.
But the list will shrink, but not. I don't know if it will shrink that much, honestly.
Yeah, there'll be a few, I think, that ride it out. Should mention, too, before we wrap up this first segment here on the Starting 5 podcast, shout out to Erskine Academy last Tuesday. Matt Berry getting his first win as a head coach with Erskine Academy as they topped the Eagles. But again, just a big one. They topped the Gardner Tigers in that one. So shout out the Erskine Academy Eagles and Matt Berry, their first win, 57-48 over Gardner. So hopefully that program will continue to grow. Any final thoughts here before we jump into the Starting 5?
Man, a lot of crazy performances last week. I feel like we've never had a list that long. Every day, it's like 10 people.
I was going to say, and that's the thing, we had to narrow it down. It was really hard. There was tons, I mean, if you saw the notes, there was a lot of people that unfortunately didn't get on, but, it's just...
Keep balling. Keep putting up those points.
It's incredible. So we'll be back after this with more of the Starting 5 podcast. Taylor Mannix, Greg Levinsky. Again, the Starting 5 coming up after this.
If you've been injured in an accident, get Maine's most recognized personal injury law firm working for you today. The law offices of Joe Bornstein, fighting and winning for injured Mainers for nearly 50 years. Selected best lawyers in America for personal injury. Recognized for professional excellence. With more than $500 million collected for injured Mainers and over 25,000 victories for Maine families. Call Joe for a free case evaluation and get the Bornstein Advantage.
Are you a CDL driver or diesel technician looking for a consistent work schedule, great pay, and outstanding benefits? Casella Waste Systems is looking for you. The drivers and technicians at Casella participate in a career pathways program that offers exceptional advancement opportunity, regular merit increases, and safety bonus incentives. Career advancement, competitive pay, great benefits, and an exceptional work-life balance. What more could you ask for? Become a driver or technician at Casella. Visit casella.com/careers or text CASELLA to 97211 to apply today.
Welcome back into the Starting 5 podcast, brought to you by Big Time Hoops Maine and presented by Town & Country Federal Credit Union, also sponsored by Next Gen Fitness. But when it comes to finances, members of Town & Country Federal Credit Union enjoy nothing but net. Become a member and start scoring benefits, including a no-fee, no minimum balance rewards checking account that pays you. Plus, get up to $25 a month in ATM fee refunds and more. Free, no-fee debit cards are offered to anyone 14 and older. And Town & Country has one of the highest rated mobile apps in the country, so you can do you and your banking anytime from anywhere. Local service, local decisions, and awesome rates on loans too. Open an account in 5 minutes at tcfcu.com. Federally insured by NCUA. Membership eligibility required. Equal opportunity lender. Visit tcfcu.com for more information. And welcome back into the Starting 5 podcast. Greg Levinsky, Taylor Mannix here. We're back as we get ready to break down the Starting 5. Again, talking a little bit with this first topic, TA in Portland. Second topic, Grey New Gloucester, girls and boys. Old Orchard Beach in the third. Fourth, Class B contenders, and, of course, duos at the end. Let's lead it off. TA and Portland. Man, what a game. I ended up watching a lot of that last night, and after seeing them play against Oxford Hills, you knew that this game against TA was going to be kind of the, okay, like, here's your chance to get the signature win that you thought you were supposed to have against Oxford Hills. And honestly, I thought they played good enough against Oxford Hills to get it. They fell a little bit short. Didn't really like how they slowed the pace down. You and I talked about that a little bit off air. If you're going to slow the pace down like that against Oxford Hills, you have to be able to put the ball in the net too when you have your looks. So I feel like they didn't do that against Oxford Hills. Against Thornton, though, they did that. They held it. They held the lead. It looked like a comfortable lead. At times, Will Davies would hit a shot, or you'd get a big shot from Thornton Academy, and, it would get them within a couple. I remember I'm texting you, and, it's within 2, but then within immediately, Remy Joe hits a big shot, or Pepe hits a big shot, and they're rolling. Right. So I'm really high now on this Portland team. To start the season, I think there was a lot of questions what they were going to look like, injuries, how can Brady Tower lead this team? Obviously, if you remember the Lewiston game they lost in the first game, he got teed up. Yeah. That led to a little bit of the team kind of falling apart. So now that this team's been able to kind of tighten up their seams, just tighten up some of those loose edges, you're seeing a potential contender for Double A.
For me, that what makes the Portland boys so special is that they can win games ugly.
Yeah.
And not a lot of teams can do that. Now, that being said, they lose games ugly because they should have beaten Oxford Hills. They were up by 10 midway through the third quarter. They should have won that game. They were up by 15 against Cheverus. They won by 3. But Portland also finds a way to beat Thornton in an ugly sort of win. So they can win and lose ugly. But I think that's what makes them a good team, is that they don't have to have a perfect, flawless game. When you think about the South and you think of a team like Gorham, for example, Gorham can beat anyone, but they have to win perfectly. They have to hit all their threes. They shoot 1,000,000 threes, and that's how they win. That's how they lose. They live or die by it. Portland, they can win a 44-42 game. They can do that. And I think that they have the depth as well that a lot of teams don't have, Taylor. For me, I mean, you go beyond the starting lineup, like Pepito Guirmagisha. I don't even think he started last night. He hasn't been starting.
Guirmagisha is
Jesse
one of my
Camise, our boy.
Jesse Camise and Guirmagisha are just incredible. They are so fun to watch. And again, last night, Pepito was a huge part of that. And that's the thing. Coach Russo has a lot of interchangeable parts. This team is deep. It's not just the starting 5. They can interchange a lot of parts.
They have it's like they can hockey sub in some ways for the guards. And I talked to Coach Russo after the game against Cheverus, and he was saying how right now they play 11 guys, and kind of the goal is to get it down to 8. But what he was saying is that he can't do it now because he has a lot of guys that are playing really well, and he also needs to get those the on the fence guys to either prove it or not. Yep. And I think some of those guys are starting to prove it and prove that they belong in that 8. Kids like Pepito and Jesse. I mean,
Jesse's game last night was huge.
Starting.
Look, I mean, and even if he's not, his roll off the bench is so important. And last night they used him down low, and I don't think Thornton really had an answer for him.
That's the thing. I think he was a bad matchup for Oxford Hills because they have size. But any team that doesn't have a traditional big guy is going to have a
he's
hard
very versatile.
time with Jesse Camise.
He's quick.
He can pass. He can shoot. Yeah.
No, and that's the thing. Portland's so versatile. Like, you talk about they got Remy. We thought that would be oh, man, this is going to be the go-to scorer. He has 20 last night. It's everybody else that contributes to that. And to me, it's their defensive identity. Thornton Academy last night averaged 71.5 points going into that game. Yeah. And you looked at Oxford. Oxford was averaging about 60 going into that game, and the results of those: Portland again winning 64. They held Thornton Academy to 44. They held Oxford Hills to 48. Yeah. And then when you mentioned being able to muck it up, the game I think back to is December 13th, the Bonnie Eagle game that I got to see, 42-28. Yeah. No one played good in that game. Neither team. I bet both teams would tell you they want that game back, but Portland found a way to win because, to me, they pride themselves on defense first. And looking around Double A, they've kind of asserted themselves as a team to watch. And I mean, what do you think now? I mean, after this kind of, we see Portland can compete with Oxford Hills. They beat Thornton. Lewiston beat up. Yeah. Where do you see these favorites now?
I think so just in the North alone, Portland's my number 1. I think that they are the best team in Double A North. They may not have the best player in Double A North, but I think they're the best team. And I don't know. I feel like when I watch Oxford Hills, it's like they say it's like football on basketball court in a lot of ways. A lot of those kids are amazing football players, and Cole's a great basketball player. Tegan's obviously a great basketball player, but I don't know. Portland just seems like a great basketball team. And I think something that I want to touch on too, not to be lost here, because in the South, TA hasn't lost a game to a Double A South team yet. So they have a really big stretch coming up because they play Noble. We know what Noble's done. They play South Portland. They play Noble again. They play Gorham, and they play Falmouth. So TA has a lot of games here that they need to win to prove that they still belong, not just number 1 in my rankings, which doesn't really mean that much, but they really are the number 1 team in Double A South. They have a huge stretch coming up that they need to perform in, because if they don't, they're going to be lumped in with everyone else, like South Portland, Bonnie Eagle, Gorham, Noble. All these teams are in there. And if they don't win honestly, if they don't win all of those games, really, let's be realistic, they're not going to be on, because they were kind of in their own tier. And they still are for now, but if they lose any of those games, they're just with everyone else.
And I'll be honest, I mean, South Portland, I feel like they can only get better, and their only loss is a 9-point loss at home to Thornton. They get Thornton on the 17th.
Gorham last night.
Yeah, of course, and Gorham too, who got they needed that one to come back.
Gorham lost 4 in a row before that.
Yeah.
The question is TA.
But that's what I mean. What's South Portland? Because I feel like South Portland right now, we'll get a good look at them at Thornton Academy again.
I
think they can compete.
The separation is very far.
I don't either, and that's the thing. I think when you look at AA, at first when we started this season, everyone kind of thought Oxford Hills and Thornton Academy. But slowly we've seen Lewiston, we've seen Portland, we've seen Gorham, South Portland. I mean, and I'll be honest, throw Hamden in the mix a little bit too, because they can play. I mean, there's a lot of teams, I think, in the mix. And I'll be honest, I don't care that Noble's sitting at 500 right now. That's a really good basketball team, and they're getting Thornton Academy on the 13th, and coming off that Portland loss.
That's what I'm saying.
Big opportunity for Noble.
Back. They get them twice in 3 games. Yeah, I mean, for how, I don't want to say over, but for how decided AA felt a week or 2 ago, hell no.
Yeah, it's a lot different now.
We said the South was basically, I basically said, and I can eat my words, the South was wrapped up. That's what I said. The North, we said, was a little bit of a mess, but we didn't realize how much of a mess the North was. Right. And we didn't realize that the South, it wasn't over. So I can eat it on that.
Well, and again, it's great for the excitement, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else we can get. But let's get into the second topic. Grey New Gloucester, what a run for them! I mean, the Grey New Gloucester team. I mean, we talked a little bit about Herbert there, and he has just been, unbelievable. He set a scoring record. Nate Hebert had 42 points. That's a record for Grey New Gloucester for the most points scored in a single game. I mean, he's just been one of the better players. It's really led by a core group of guys. They've all been playing together since, second, third grade. Senior captains Max Kenny, Mikey Ryan, they both step up on both sides of the ball, really versatile players, and they've played since the early days as well. So you talk about, the Hebert boys have been playing together forever. A lot of chemistry. It's just a team that started to kind of gel and figure themselves out and have an identity right in front of us.
Absolutely.
And they're really coming together right now.
They're a contender here in A South. I mean, and we're going to get to the girls right after this, but look, Falmouth I know is really good. They're my 2 team in the South. They haven't lost to a AA team. Westbrook hasn't either. But Grey New Gloucester's right there, man. At 7-2, they're hot. I just calculated some math before this. Hebert is averaging over 27 a game the last 5 games. They've won all of those games. They started off 1-2, and they've won 6 games since. I mean, Grey New Gloucester's right there. They could certainly be in it. And just an aside, but I think worthwhile, I sent you this picture. I didn't realize it, but I coached in the ST Youth League when they were in first grade. Not Nate Hebert, but the twin brothers.
Oh, Noah and Aiden.
Noah and Aiden.
Yeah.
And then Mikey Ryan were on my little second and third grade team. And I was like, I know those names. Where are those names from? And I pulled up 2011, these adorable 4-foot tall little munchkins who are now 6'2" ballers,
Yeah, right. 7-2, third in Class A, in Class A South, and you're right. I mean, Hebert just last week had 2 record-breaking accomplishments. He broke the school's 3-point record 3 points per game record with 9 on Tuesday. The 29 points versus Freiburg was on Saturday, and of course he broke that record with 42 points. Again, I mean, he's just having an incredible year. And again, you're right, Greg. And I think, and it's nothing to take away from Falmouth by any means. I think Falmouth is playing really well, and I think that Falmouth is definitely the team to beat. And we can get into this in a second because I want to talk on the Grey New Gloucester girls, but while we're on the boys, we might as well just kind of address this now. Because Grey New Gloucester at 7-2, it's them, but there's the Westbrook boys at 8-2. So I'm with you. Grey New Gloucester's asserted themselves, and you look no further than last night's game against Brunswick, right? I mean, just a really well-played game. Just an incredible way to grind out a win, right?
It's a win that they had to have because Brunswick is not the greatest team, honestly. They had lost to most of the middle of the pack top teams in A South. So that's a win. If you're a good team, you need to win that game. And they did find a way to grind it out, as you said. And I think that's a great transition point to the girls, Taylor, who, we could talk about Nate Hebert's accomplishments all day, but what the girls did last night as a team may be bigger than anything Nate Hebert has done, or at least rivals it, just because they knock off undefeated Brunswick. I didn't see this coming. I don't think anyone saw this coming. I know Brunswick was without a starter, but as we said before, you got to give credit where credit's due. And what a win for the Great New Gloucester girls.
Yeah, well, and you look at it, Allie Portis scored her only bucket with under a minute left in regulation to lift them over the Dragons and hand them that first loss in gray. Issa Ross had 11 of her 13 points in the first half. Ella Kenny added 10 points. Dakota Shipley led Brunswick with 13. But it was such a great team effort, and they were down in the first quarter. They battled back a little bit in the second, and they really didn't take over until that 10-5 fourth quarter where they held that Brunswick offense under double digits, which is something I didn't think was even possible, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I mean, this Brunswick team was in most games scoring 60-plus points.
Yeah,
so to be held below 50 is really impressive effort by the Great New Gloucester team defensively. And, yeah, I mean, I was very surprised by that. I'm sure Brunswick will bounce back and probably they won't lose the rest of the season or whatever. But, kudos to Great New Gloucester girls for saying to people like us, hey, we deserve to be in the conversation too in A South, and they certainly do. They're 8-1, man. That snuck up on me. I don't know about you, but that kind of came out of. I didn't even realize that.
No, I was not expecting to be sitting here today talking about the Great New Gloucester boys and girls, and them being contenders in both the girls and boys on the A side. And look, with that, I think we should touch a little bit on that Class A landscape, because again, we talked about it a little bit with the boys side on the South. Westbrook 8-2, and Westbrook's a team that's so intriguing to me. Like, what are they going to be? Their only losses are to Cheverus and Bonnie Eagle. They've found ways to win against everyone else so far in their conference. You look at Falmouth, obviously his only losses to Sopo. So I mean, what are your thoughts here? And we'll quickly talk about the North in a second, but just the South, obviously Great New Gloucester hurt themselves. Is there anybody else in that? I had a sleeper in there as Kennebunk at 5-4.
Kennebunk is good. Yeah, I don't think there's anyone else for me. And then in terms of the girls South, Falmouth is weird, man. Like, the Falmouth girls have been on fire lately.
That was a big win over Greeley.
Yeah.
And like, that's the thing. I mean, what are they? I mean, we know Anna Turgeon.
If they had Sloane Ginnivan, they'd be the best team, but they don't. And
she get hurt?
Yeah, ACL. She's going to Notre Dame for lacrosse. Obviously, amazing athlete. But, yeah, I mean, on the girls, your Westbrook girls, I call them your Westbrook girls because you called them. They were going to be good. Yeah, they're 8-3. I don't know, man. I think
that's incredible. That is a turnaround. They won 5 games last year. That's incredible to me that the Westbrook, and that's the thing. Did we think that this I don't know. Did we think that A was going to be this competitive? I personally didn't. Yeah, I really didn't.
Greeley's 4-4. We know Greeley's going to end up being probably in the state championship.
Well, and let's be honest. Do we think that that Class A South for the girls side goes 7 deep? It might.
They do. I mean,
Greeley, Westbrook, Falmouth, Greater Gloucester, Marshwood, Brunswick, Mount Ararat. Those are,
and they're beating up on each other now.
That's going to be a hell of a playoff. And we'll touch on the North real quick because the North has obviously had some pretty awesome stuff happen on the boys' side. We know we've talked a lot about Brewer, but what is going on in the middle of this? Skowhegan now has found a way to win a couple, obviously losing to Coney last night. Coney 7-2. They've kind of got back on the right track after a tough loss to Nokomis. Mount Blue at 6-3. Their 2 losses, though, are to Brewer and Coney, so you know they can compete. Nokomis, though, is the interesting one to me. Obviously, a team that's coming off a state title. Matt and White's still up there. Like, what can they bring? So I think this is going to be interesting to watch what's going to happen, especially in A North on the boys' side.
I think that Nokomis, especially their experience playing in the state championship and their playoff run last year, is going to be very helpful in this tournament. I know that they don't have Cooper Flag. Like, I'm not an idiot. They don't have Ace Flag, right? But a lot of those guys played important roles on that team. And I think that tournament experience is going to come to fruition moving forward for them immensely, because they had a lot of guys that played significant minutes on that team. I know that they had the 2 that were great.
Well, and I got a chance to watch them play Portland. They hung with Portland.
Right, they're good.
They're good. They're very that whole A North Conference is very talented.
Yeah.
Like, I think between the South and the North, it's going to be a good state final no matter who goes there, because I know Brewers are the favorite. They're my number one. I think they're the best team in the state right now, the way they've been playing. But that doesn't mean I don't think Falmouth or Grey New Gloucester couldn't go in there and ruffle some feathers if they end up making the state title. Should mention, too, on the girls' side, obviously Gardner 8-0, but Lawrence at 7-2, Coney at 7-2, Camden Hills, Nokomis kind of in the middle there, Skowhegan at 4-5 after a great year last year. Want to mention the Coney Rams, though, because last week they had an incredible win. They only had 7 healthy players, including a call-up from the junior varsity squad, and they still found a way to win 50-43 on a Tuesday night over Maranacook. That's awesome. Without sophomore forward Abby Morrill, who's the team's leading scorer, who we'll talk a little bit about when we talk about the duos, because Coney features some of the best there. And when you're looking on the girls' side, especially in points per game, it's really intriguing. I mean, on the girls' side right now, just looking at the Class A, Brunswick scoring 66 points per game, which you mentioned, Greg, up there. Coney at 54. But when you look at, scoring defense, it's Brunswick again, 30. Gardner's up at the top. Mount Ararat giving up 35. So
well, that's why that's also impressive that Grey New Gloucester got 15 extra points on Brunswick's average.
Yeah.
So again, credit to them for an incredible win, and I know that they're going to play again, and we'll see what happens, whatever. But you know what? In this moment, good for them.
Yeah, and Grey New Gloucester, again, shout out to y'all. Great job in what's a very, very competitive Class A landscape. Let's go to number 3, Old Orchard Beach. Greg, I'll let you take over, talk about this cover story you had. Unbelievable, and then we'll get into a little Class C discussion.
No, this is great. I mean, thanks for the compliment on that, and also thank you to Brady King, who is our fantastic videographer, photographer, multimedia extraordinaire, who I had this vision, this idea, Old Orchard Beach is these 2 great seniors. Let's take them to the beach, get a really cool photo. And we did that, made a beautiful cover. And the story, it was honestly a beautiful story. Elise McNair and Landon Johnson, the 2 senior kind of stars, they've had like the same it's so weird. They've had the same career, they're the same height. They both score, Elise just scored her 1,000th. Landon's about to score his 1,000. Both teams are gunning for a Class C, South title. Very mirroring stories. They've been friends since 3rd grade. They're very competitive with each other, but check in every game. It's just a really great story. And, I think that in our area, Old Orchard doesn't usually get a lot of attention. But right now, man, I mean, in terms of when you talk about teams that are going to be competitive in their class, both the boys and girls will be. So, that's kind of, that's what it looks like for me in Old Orchard. And, obviously, the boys lost last night to Maranacook, who's a Class B team, and the girls lost the first game of the year, but hasn't lost since. So I think that these teams are going to be competitive in Class C.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, you mentioned it, especially on the girls' side, they're finding ways to win. What is it, 9-0 now? You mentioned for the girls coming into this one.
Since losing that first one, they've ripped off 8 in a row. But dude, I mean, I know we want to touch on this briefly, but like specifically Class C South girls is absurdly loaded.
Yeah.
Because you have NYA, and we got some stats on NYA. I just want to get off real quick from the coach there, Tom Robinson. Angel Huntsman averaging 13 points, 11 assists per game. Sarah English, who's going to go play at Roanoke College, averaging 16 and 8. Huntsman is going to play at Bates. So that's to me the best team in AA, or excuse me, in oh my goodness, C South, not AA. Where am I going with that? NYA. OOB's up there. And then, by the way, Halldale's hasn't lost a game since before COVID and has such a great point guard in Hayden Medor. And I mean, the C South girls, they're top heavy, but those 3 teams are truly among the best 3 teams in the state, regardless of class, in my opinion.
Yeah,
straight up point blank, period.
Absolutely. I think you're 100% on. And of course, Old Orchard Beach taking a tough loss to Maranacook last night, that kind of knocked them off the perch because Deergo now the only remaining undefeated team there in C South. But that's going to be an interesting one. You have Richmond at 9-1 in there, Mount Abrams at 6-2, Monmouth with the Calder brothers.
Too, yeah.
Like the Calder brothers, Manny and Sammy are interesting to watch because it seems like every time Monmouth has a big game, they're led by Sammy or Manny.
Right, yeah. I mean, on the boys' side, you're right. But Deergo's the reigning state champs.
I think they're the favorite.
Yeah, but Old Orchard also, I mean, Maranacook's B. So, like, that's one thing. I mean, I know it's kind of...
Well, and you got to think, like, where do the Halldale boys fit in? We talked a lot about Jackson Leach. He's averaging 12.3 games. Carter Bork is averaging 13. TJ Wilson averaging 17 points a game for them as well. So you do have a three-headed monster at Halldale that you have to wonder eventually will have to kick things up. I mean, you have a kid there, Cody Cobb, as well, a little bit of a defensive specialist. The first two off the bench, and Keegan Carey and Nick Brown, also really talented kids. So where does Halldale at 5-2, even down there at 9th, fit in? Winthrop, who's 4-6, usually a good one in the Ramblers. So it's kind of interesting to see, a few of these teams up there. In Richmond, too. Richmond, I'm intrigued in because their only loss is to Old Orchard Beach, and it was only a 10-point loss. They get Monmouth here on the 17th. I think that's going to be a great test for them to see where they stand in C South, right?
Yeah, it's obviously this is one of those regions where not everyone's going to make the tournament. You're going to get 12 of those 16 or so. So, yeah, I mean, some of these teams, like a Halldale, is fighting for their playoff lives.
Mount Abram only lost to Deergo 67-65 back on the 5th, too. Like, Mount Abram can play. I mean, they hung with one of the best teams in the state.
And it's weird because Old Orchard doesn't play most of these teams. Obviously, they played Richmond, but they don't play most of these other teams in C South.
Yeah, they get Halldale at the end of the season, it looks like. They get Waynefleet and, NYA's
so they don't
in
play
the mix.
that right now on the Hill Points at like 2 through 6. They don't play any of those teams, except for Richmond. So
you have to wonder. I mean, we always talk about that. Do you think that's a disadvantage for them going to the playoffs? I mean, I think
it is immensely.
They'd love to see Deer go. Right,
I think when you are the underdog, if you will, you want to have seen that team once already to get like Portland and Oxford Hills. Portland's seen them once,
Well, and that's the thing. And then when you look at the girls on the C side, right? Richmond now is the number 1 based on heel points, but Old Orchard Beach still there at 8-1. NYA 8-0 as well. Halldale 7-0. Kents Hill 6-0. Like
them,
this is an extremely competitive thing. When you talk about the Halldale girls, as you mentioned, Greg, I mean, they go 10-11 deep. Six different kids scored in double digits this year already. 2 have scored 9 points at least. They have tons of options, some elite guards. We mentioned Hayden Medora, junior, 17 points a game, 4 assists, 3 steals. Plenty of players as well. KJ Green, what is that? KJ Greenhow? Did I say that correctly? Greenlaw, there it is. Thank you, sir. 12.2, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals as well. So there's plenty of players on there, really senior group. But there's even a sprinkle of freshmen in there. Sierra Gibbons, who averages 6.3 rebounds. Aubrey Gilbert, who's down there with a junior, a sophomore, and Jade Graham. So, I mean, this is a really well-balanced Halldale team through and through, and you have to wonder where they fit into this as well, because this is going to be a really competitive Class C South once we get into the tournament, because I think even the Deergo girls have shown they can compete. Shakopee Valley's at 5-6. Carabec has even had, I feel like, a little bit of a signature win there against Mount Abram, the girls team, who has having a little bit of struggles this year, but they're also with 3 wins. So, I mean, it's just... We'll see. I thought Carabec getting a big win over Winthrop as well. The Winthrop girls at 7-3. That's the big win for Carabec that I saw. But that's the thing. Winthrop now has dropped back-to-back games to Spruce and Kents Hill. So, I don't know.
We're both undefeated. So,
it's mayhem. And as we've talked about, if you're seeing a trend here, the things that we're discussing here between Class AA, A, and now C, these are pretty wide open as we're heading into kind of the middle of the season. Yeah. And I thought at this point the picture would be a little bit more clear, but for some of these classes, it's just not.
It was clear, and then now it's not because teams are not being 18-0.
Right, yeah. And I will mention, too, we should give a shout-out because we're on Class C. Shout-out to Fort Kent. They are 8-1 in the North. Dexter is 8-1 as well in the North. Calais, Lee Academy, respectively, 3-4. Lee Academy 3, Calais 4. George Stevens 6-2. Woodland 5-3. Fort Fairfield, Penobscot, Hodgdon, all kind of in the mix there on the C North boys side. And on the girls side, Hodgdon 9-0 and Dexter 9-0. We kind of mentioned them. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people feel Hodgdon is the team to beat up there.
But bit of a crash course.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and it doesn't look like we get them in the regular season, so we'll have to wait towards the regular or the postseason before we get a Dexter Hodgdon matchup. But don't forget about Central.
Don't forget about Penobscot Valley, too.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, they're 6-1. They're on quite the run, and they only lost 44-41 to Dexter.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, there's a lot of good teams up in C North. We didn't forget about you up there, Fort Kent, Calais, Central, Rustic, Stearns, all those ones. Yeah. We'll be keeping tabs and we'll be getting to the North eventually, but wanted to highlight the South this week with just how everything crazy is going on. Let's talk quickly though. Class B contenders, Craig. We'll start.
Same thing, man. So I think what's like just stepping back for a minute here, Taylor. And you tell me if you disagree, but. Last year there were so many foregone conclusions. This year there are like 0 foregone conclusions.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. No, it's great that we're sitting here debating so many different schools in the mix right now. And when you look at the C South, especially on the girls' side, we've talked so much about Oceanside. I think everyone writes them in. But let's talk about Spruce Mountain at 9-0. Let's talk about Wells at 8-1. Let's talk a little bit about Madomic Valley, Maranacook, and Levitt, too.
I'll give you a little bit here on Spruce Mountain. You said they're 9-0, obviously. Olivia Mastine, who's a junior, she's averaging 20 points, 5 rebounds per game. Jaden Pingree, who you mentioned earlier, really good junior point guard, averaging 14.6 rebounds and 5 assists. And then Aubrey Kachnovich, another junior, so that they have a 3-headed junior monster, averaging 11.7 rebounds and 5 steals per game. But Spruce Mountain does play mostly Class C schedule. So here's the big thing, Taylor. Kents Hill tonight. Halldale Saturday. This is what will tell us how good Spruce Mountain is.
I completely agree. You're going to get tested here. And I think we know where, again, we know who Oceanside is. But the real question here in B is who's going to push them in the South. And look, let's be honest, Craig. Don Abbott leaves Wells. Extraordinary career. We know what happened with the teams that he had down there, obviously led by Grace Ramsdale, who's, again, D1 player. They had so much talent in Wells. Here they are on the girls' side, and maybe it's time to put some respect on their name. Wins over Yarmouth, York, Kennebunk recently. They get Freeport tomorrow. We'll see how that goes, but the 17th is the game to watch against Old Orchard Beach. We'll really see what the Wells Warriors are made of, but I think that's their chance to send waves around the state to say we're contenders and see
and
South.
And Taylor, it's not just that. They have
South,
Gray New Gloucester the game after that. Then 2 games after that, they have Greeley. So they have 3 games here that they can really prove themselves. If they win 2 of those 3 games, oh my God, watch out for Wells. They'll be challenging a team like Oceanside for sure. So, yeah, I mean, these 2 teams after Oceanside, Spruce Mountain and Wells, have a lot of potential here to make up some ground, not only in the heel points, but also in our hearts, if you will, to see if they really are going to be a challenger for Oceanside. And I know that we talked about the Oceanside boys a lot this year as we transition to B North. Excuse me. And B South, back to the boys. Oceanside's been interesting, of course.
Right, we always talk about them. It's like,
but how about our number 1 team there, Madomic Valley?
Yeah, they're sitting great. And here's the thing. They lost 95% of the offense. 5 starters and the KVAC B Player of the Year last year. And Coach DePatsy also closing in on 400 wins now. They've found a way to get it done at 8-2 despite losing all that. But unfortunately, they took a step back last night, losing to Mount View 73-69. So Mount View now with a huge victory. And unfortunately, Madomic Valley maybe a step back. They have MCI on the 13th and at Maranacook, which is a massive test for them because we just saw Maranacook and the way they can play. So now it'll be interesting to see how Madomic Valley respond to that. But that's the thing. For Spruce Mountain and Madomic Valley at 2 and 3, how good are they? Because let's be honest, and I don't mean this, I'm not trying to be South biased, but we've seen York, Yarmouth, the Maranacooks and things like that, the Cape Elizabeths come down and face some of these teams that come from the KVAC and in those ranks, and it's harder for them, I think, at times. So I'm going to be interested to see how this goes again. And when you look at Maranacook on the boys' side, they're averaging 63 points per game. Madomic's at 63 points per game as well. They're not bad teams. They're very talented teams. They find ways to score, too. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out.
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar.
Clearly, Coach DePatsy knows what he's doing up at Madomic.
And I just think it's very similar on both girls and boys B South, that you kind of have your ocean sides, you have your other teams with great records, and let's see how good they really are.
Well, and how about Lincoln Academy at 6 and 3? I don't want to sleep on them, and here's why. 2 losses to Oceanside. That's 2 of the 3 losses, and then a loss to Madomic Valley.
Yeah.
And the losses to Oceanside. You ready for this? The first game, 47-55. The second time they played them, Greg, though, 63-58 loss. They got a little. So now that tells me Lincoln Academy in the playoffs, man, that's going to be a fun game to watch. They clearly are getting a little bit better. And I'm not sleeping on York and Yarmouth. I know Yarmouth lost to Levitt. They're on back-to-back losing games against Greeley and Levitt, but that Yarmouth team, defending state champs, you have to think they'll kind of figure things out as it goes. And, of course, a couple other teams out of Lake Region, Poland. We mentioned a couple big things from them as well. So Class B on that side, pretty good. What do you think about on the north side for the girls?
Yeah, I mean, we had one of the most important games really on both boys and girls last week when we had the split between Old Town and Ellsworth. Of course, the Old Town girls winning that one, the Old Town or Ellsworth boys winning on the other side. So, yeah, I mean, Old Town and Ellsworth, to me, are kind of crash coursing, if you will. But we have to pay attention to Caribou. Someone told me that Caribou wasn't going to be good when I talked about them earlier this year.
Now.
But, yeah, but they were wrong. Presque Isle isn't bad. MCI is a good record, but I don't know. I mean, you lose to you know they've lost a lot of games by like 30 or 40 to some of the better teams. So I think to me, really, it's kind of Old Town and Ellsworth with Caribou and Presque Isle sort of creeping around, and never count out Foxcroft, honestly, on the girls' side either.
Well, and that's the thing when we're looking at the girls' side. I'm with you. And when you look at Caribou, they did get that big win over Ellsworth, so they're sitting up atop. And Washington Academy as well at 8-2. When they played the top teams, they really got kind of, I don't want to say exposed, but you saw a little bit about what they were. So I don't know.
39-point loss to Old Town.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say, since the loss to Holt and Presque Isle's ripped off 3 in a row, one of those is Caribou. So that's interesting to watch as well. They get MDI. They'll have at Old Town, though, on the 14th. We'll learn a lot about Presque Isle in that one. And on the boys' side for B, again, Ellsworth 9-0. We've talked a ton about them, but Orono at 9-1. And what kind of leads us into the second topic as well. We have Caribou, Old Town, but Winslow at 7-1. This is the biggest question for me. What is Winslow? The one loss this season at Lincoln Academy, which again, as we mentioned, you see Lincoln Academy is not a bad team. Right. They're a good team, as we just explained to everybody. It's not a bad loss there. But where's Winslow fit in this grouping?
I don't know yet, because they did beat Oceanside, which was obviously a great win. But other than that, they haven't played a ton of great teams. That's the thing for me, is like I need to see a little bit more from Winslow. We know their dynamic duo of Jason Reynolds and Andrew Poulin, but I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I'm not definitive on if they're legit or not, to be honest.
Right. Well, and last night though they don't have the double machine in Reynolds, and they still give it to Belfast, and of course Poulin is just an unstoppable force, and that's the thing. I mean, how good is that kid? Poulin is just fantastic, and that to me will lead into this next topic, which is what is one of the best duos in the state. I feel like this one again will be fun for Tom to fool around with as well as we get into this. And I think immediately when you start looking at the best duos in the state, you look at the KVAC games through 1-7. Shout out to TJ Maines for these statistics as well, and all the other KVAC coaches. But you're looking at the number 5 and number 1 scorer in the KVAC. Jason Reynolds 31.8, Andrew Poulin 21.1. It's tough to argue that these two could potentially be, and we'll get into a bunch because there are a bunch of other ones we can talk about, but these two for me and you, I think, are arguably the best duo in the state, and it's tough to argue with numbers
Where
like that.
Where do you ever see two players averaging 50
combined?
Never.
It's tough, right?
You never see a 30-20. You never see almost 60 a game combined. I mean, that's just unbelievable. The scoring output that those two young men are putting up this year. We're going by the numbers here for the most part, and the numbers in this case do not lie. Those two Winslow boys, they're cooking.
Well, that's just it. I mean, I thought they've been fantastic throughout this thing, and that's what's been really, really fun to watch is how they've been able to go. And, of course, I think when you look at – let's talk, of course, about on the boys' side first. Other than those two, I think you have to mention the Galley brothers.
Yep.
I think those two kind of get in there. I think Tegan Pelletier and Cole Polkinen have to be in the conversation. I would argue that you could put Portland in, but they're such a team. There's not two kids.
And, that's the thing is it's not really a duo. So Portland doesn't really have a duo. When we're talking dynamic duos, that's sort of a different story compared to just kind of, good teams. So yeah, that the Galley boys are definitely a good one for sure. It's definitely an interesting question. Like, and you think about Falmouth, it's kind of like, well, they have Judd, but and then a bunch of other good players, but I don't know if they really have a dynamic duo type. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I think those Winslow boys are probably my one. Maybe the Galley boys at number 2 and number 3. I don't know. You gotta tell me.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, just looking around the state, I mean, you have to. I guess you could look at. When you look at Southern Rustic, I mean, Dylan Burpee. When you look at, Forest Hills, you have, a Des Jardin.
You got 2 of them, actually. I just figured that out. There's another one somehow.
But always seems to be another one up there. It's no surprise. But, no, I mean, again, it's fun to see a few of those. I think you could probably include G&G's combos a little bit into that one. I think when you're looking as well down the line, I mean, just looking at even some of these KVAC stats, it's interesting because I guess you could put Parker Sargent and Cam Doohan in the mix for Coney. Parker Sargent averages 17 points a game. Cam Doohan averages 13. So those two combined for a little bit of a combo in that one.
That's not even half of what Poulin and Reynolds.
No, right, but doesn't that I think is what brings it into perspective of how well these two are playing, right? And again, the Galley brothers, I think you have to mention Carter Galley's at 21 points, Conan Gallen's at 16.
Yeah, that's a very good one.
They're a pretty good mix right there. And again, looking down at you, let's see. I'm looking for Mount Blue, but Mount Blue's led by Evan Sterling. He's an 18-point a game guy, but it doesn't look like there's anyone else in the top 30.
A lot of these teams have like a star, but not a co-star.
Well, and you know who's a good one? Well, look, Zach McLaughlin, 21 points a game. JJ Wolfington of Hamden, 13.4. Yeah. That's a pretty good combo. You could look at Grady Hartsgrove of Nokomis with Madden White. Grady Hartsgrove is 13 points a game. Madden White's at 16. Again, these are, though, just to put into perspective of why you and I are high on Winslow.
Like across the state, you have your two guys averaging mid to high double figures, but that's what makes those Winslow boys.
I know, and that exactly, and I think that's where it comes down for me too. Let's talk about the girls' side because I think on the women's side, or excuse me,
there's a lot more on the girls.
Well, and I mean, right off the back, I think the reality is when we talk about, the girl. I mean, you could go down the list. Let's be honest, Ella and Sierra Carson. Maddie and Emma Lazat, Maddie Fitzpatrick, Emma Lazat, Abby Quinn, and Emmy Streams from Bangor. Audrey Mackey, Bailey Breen.
100%. Honestly, Addison Sulikowski and Kylie Lamson from TA. Honestly, they have 4 players that you might put in that.
I mean, and Natalie Moeller and Kaylee Kubicki of Marana Cook, both seniors, averaging 24 combined points together. Coney with Abby Morrill, Morgan Cunningham, and Sage Fortin, all 3 averaging 13 points. I know awesome. It's not a duo, but maybe trios when we do this again, because that's quite the triple threat.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. I mean,
Madomic Valley, Katina Williamson and Addison McCormack, both averaging 14 and 13 up there at Madomic Valley. Cami Parmalou's really kind of the force that makes it go at Mount Ararat. So
and of course, Brunswick, you have the Shipley girl.
Yep, and Maddie Warner. Yep,
and
she's
the Morris
extremely
girls.
talented.
Yeah, there's a lot of options on the girls' side. I mean, if Sloan Ginnivan wasn't hurt, her and Turgeon would be a really great one. And then, honestly, Elise McNair is so good at Old Orchard, but Tessa Ferguson, who's a sophomore guard, who's really, really good. Of course, for NYA, you have Huntsman, and then her running mate as well, Sarah. Let me just pull up her last name. Don't be an idiot. Sarah English, who's averaging 60. So Huntsman's averaging 13 points, 11 assists. English is averaging 16 points and 8 rebounds. So there's a lot of interesting duos in the girls' side, I think, more so than the boys' side. Not sure why. I think that's just kind of honestly just random, and there's no really big reason for it. It's just kind of funny the way things work out.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, up at Ellsworth for the girls' side, Grace Joffrey, I mean, I don't know if they really – and that's the thing. When you look up there, we can't forget about Central.
Oh, yeah,
the Allen sisters. I mean, you got to include the Allen sisters in that. I think you can look up at Southern or Rustic, too. I mean, I know they've struggled. Right. They've dropped
Shields
a few.
And Russell,
Yeah, there's a couple combos up there. And again, I know they've struggled a little bit. So we encourage everybody to kind of put theirs in as well. We just want to throw a bunch of our topics. And again, shout out to the coaches that all we reached out. Not as many got back to us, I think, as we had hoped. But we got a ton that did respond to us. So thank you guys.
A
lot today. So shout out to those guys who, again.
Shout out to Class B.
Yeah, I mean, that was incredible.
C,
and the KVAC does an incredible job with statistics, too. And I will say this, we should probably add Hayden Medore and KJ in there from Halldale. But again, Amanda's in the mix, too. There's a lot of, there's a lot of trios, too. I mean, if we're bringing trios into it, you could probably include Portland.
Well, yeah, I mean, then we could also talk about those Spruce Mountain girls I mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of really, really good.
For sure. So, but for us, I think we both, I'll say, so let's I guess come to a final. You got the Winslow boys, right?
For boys,
you take those two.
Those are my guys. I've been riding Reynolds since
I think
day one.
I'm gonna go with them too. It's really hard to go against them, but just to be different, I'll throw out just to be a little different and maybe kind of stir the pot. I'll go with who we talked about from the Coney boys a little bit. I like Parker Sargent there, who averages 16 points a game, and Cam Doohan at 13. Yeah. I'll take those two in the north as a great combo for me. On the girls' side, who you got? Again, we talked about so many. I think for me, I'm going to go with I want to take Bailey Breen and company over there in Mackey, but I think I'm going to actually go with Oxford Hills' Ella Pelletier and Sierra Carson because they're undefeated.
I want to challenge that because I'm going to go with the Cheverus girls, Fitzpatrick and Lazat.
So, right? Yeah, no, I mean,
they're going to be going at it twice here in the next month.
Right.
So.
Well, and shout out to all the other duos we mentioned. If we didn't mention you, we're sorry. If we missed them, hammer them in. Let us know. Get them out to Big Time Hoops. We want to hear who the best duos in the state are. If we missed you, rep your school. Put it out there. Greg Levinsky, Taylor Mannix. Any final thoughts here before we go? Another long one today, but now that we're in the middle of the season, it feels like it's only fitting that we keep hammering these out.
Man. And I thought that, I'm glad that it wasn't as finalized as we thought, because I was like, what are we going to talk about the next 4 weeks? Oh, a lot.
A lot, right? No, we got a lot. So thank you guys so much for listening here to the Starting Five podcast. Cod Path. Wow, man, long day. Can you tell y'all that I've been up all day and doing radio and stuff? Okay, anyway, let's end this right. Greg Levinsky, Taylor Mannix, Starting Five podcast, brought to you by Big Time Hoops Maine, presented by Town & Country Federal Credit Union. We'll talk to you guys next week, episode 9. Again, send us all your stuff. Talk some bleep to us, whatever you guys got to do. We'll see you next week. We're out.